Hello, good morning to all of you. And I have taken an initiative to start a video class for you. I think it would be fruitful to you. So let me continue my class on the Ghosts of Mrs Gandhi by Amitabh Ghosh. And as I discussed earlier, that Amitabh Ghosh was hesitant initially to join a march of protestation against the rioters during 1984 anti-Sikh riots, And he talked about another writer, renowned writer of Trinidad, of Caribbean island, called V.S. Naipaul. And he said that he had been extremely influenced and inspired by V.S. Naipaul's experience of his desire to join, but his inability to join in that march in South Africa. Now, because of that experience, he reflected himself in the mirror and he saw what he should do and what he shouldn't do. And because of this self-deliberation that he decided at last to join the procession. It's a peaceful procession against the rioters, organized obviously by an NGO or a relief agency. Now let me resume the text and analyze one by one. The march headed first to Lajpat Nagar, busy commercial area of mile or so away. I knew the area. Though it was in New Delhi, its streets resembled the older parts of the city, where small, cramped shops tended to spill out into the footpaths. So it was a very busy commercial area of Lajpat Nagar in New Delhi. You must have heard the name of this area in New Delhi. So usually this place had been very busy because of its commercial activities. We were shouting slogans as we marched. As usual, the procession moves with shouting and slogans. Obviously, the slogans were anti-rioting, anti-violent, Holy Gandhian staples of peace and brotherhood from half a century before. Notice the sentence. These are the examples of the slogans. Holy Gandhian staples. The word Hori means wise. Actually, Hori means grey, the color of grey. It symbolizes wisdom. Gandhian staples. Staples means some kind of principles, some kind of central or principal ideas. So principal ideas of peace and brotherhood half a century before. So obviously during the freedom struggle, Gandhiji used many such slogans of peace and brotherhood. And these slogans were now being used by these participants in the protestations, in the march. Then suddenly we were confronted with a starkly familiar spectacle. Starkly means terrible. We were confronted means faced with a starkly familiar spectacle, an image of 20th century urban horror. Underline this part of this sentence, an image of 20th century urban horror. You may write down a question. What image of 20th century urban horror did Amitabh Ghosh witness in Lajpat Nagar? Okay? The answer follows in the text itself. You will find the answer and you should write it down in your own. What are the scenes? What are the sights that this image of horror constitutes? Burned out cars, their ransacked interiors, the interiors of the cars, interiors means inside parts, visible through smashed windows. The windows have been smashed, obviously, by the rioters. Debris and rubble everywhere. Everywhere there were ruined parts, debris, piled up debris and rubble and destroyed fragments everywhere. Blackened pots had been strewn along the street. All along the street, blackened pots had been strewn. Strewn means scattered. A cinema had been gutted. Cinema means obviously cinema hall had been gutted. Had been gutted means completely burnt. Completely burnt out. Got it? And the charred faces of film stars stared out at us from half-burned posters. Charred means also burnt. Burnt out faces of film stars. Obviously the posters of the film in front of the cinema hall or around the cinema halls also have been burnt. So the faces on the posters are also burnt. Stared out at us. We know how the film stars look on the posters. They look glamorous, charming, but their faces, half-burnt faces, stared out at us from half-burnt posters. The posters, since the posters are half-burnt, their faces are staring at us as if we human beings are guilty of this destruction. As if. You must have been reminded, obviously, of the section in The Intrusion where the narrator, the female narrator and her husband saw the fishes, the dead fishes, whose eyes seemed to be accusing the narrator of their death, of their destruction. Now, let's continue reading. This is the image of the horror. You should write it down in your own language. Don't copy the language. Okay? This is very simple. As I think back to the march, my memory breaks down. Notice the use of the tense. My memory breaks down. So, when it does break, now means the moment the author is writing, the narrator is writing this text, this essay, this article. It's not an essay, it's an article. My memory breaks down. So memory obviously refers to the events of that year called year in 1984. And obviously the moment refers to when they went marching to Lajpat Nagar and saw the devastation with their eyes. So my memory breaks down, details dissolve. The details dissolve means mingle, get mixed up, and often fades. অনেক কিছু মনেও থাকবে না, মনেও পড়বে। I recently telephoned some friends who had been there. Their memories are similar to mine in only one respect. Underline this section. Their memories are similar to mine. Whose memories? Some of his friends. They too clung to one scene while successfully reading their minds of the rest. So, after so many years, the narrator usually can't remember all the details. Most of the details are faded, are mingled, confused. So he couldn't remember the particular details very clearly. So he thought that he should check it out with his friends, all those who also witnessed that scenes of destruction in Lajpat Nagar in Delhi. So they also confessed. What they confessed? They confessed that they too clung to one scene, particular one scene is clinging on to their memory. Clinging on to the memory means retained with their memory, while successfully ridding their minds of the rest. The rest of the scenes are forgotten. Successfully ridding of, get rid of. It's an idiom. It means to remove or to get out of your mind. Get it out of your mind. Simply it means to forget. So the scene my memory preserved, the scene which my memory preserved is of a moment when it seemed inevitable that we would be attacked. It's very fascinating and it's very climactic event that happened during that day when they marched to Lajpat Nagar. When it seemed inevitable, inevitable means certain, certainly possible that we would be attacked. Attacked by whom? Obviously by the rioters. They are protesting against riots. So obviously the rioters would be angry against them. So what happened? Let's see. Rounding a corner, we found ourselves facing a crowd. Rounding a corner means when we turn to a corner, took our round, when we face a corner of a street obviously, or inside that market or busy commercial area in Lajpat Nagar. All these things happened in Lajpat Nagar, remember, in Delhi. We found ourselves facing a crowd that was larger and more determined. The crowd was larger and more determined looking than any other crowds that we had encountered. Obviously, there is a slight mistake in printing. Here, it should be more determined looking than any other crowds. He's comparing the crowds with other crowds and found that this crowd is larger, this crowd is more determined. That we had encountered means we had faced. So whatever crowds he had faced earlier, he compared them with this particular crowd, that particular crowd. And he found that this crowd is very determined. Obviously, they are determined means they are resolved to do something. On each previous occasion, we had prevailed by marching at the thugs and engaging them directly. On previous occasions, these we means those who are participant in this march against violence. We had prevailed means dominated and controlled by marching at the thugs. The thugs means those who are violent, who are angry, destructive, and engaging them directly. We directly engaged them. We directly dealt with them. Face them, engaging them means face them, argued with them, and dominated over them and made them go away from that place. In dialogues, that turned quickly into extended shouting marches. Initially, we used to have dialogues with them, and these dialogues turned quickly into extended shouting marches. Extended means prolonged shouting. It should be marches, not matches. It's again a printing mistake. You should overlook it. In every instance, we had succeeded. Previously, we had succeeded in facing them down, these violent crowds down. Them means the violent crowds. But this particular mob was intent on confrontation. Underline this sentence. This particular mob, this particular cloud, which seemed to be more determined, was eager on confrontation with us. That is, with the narrators and others also. Confrontation means face-to-face, hostile argument, hostile facing off or rivalry. As its members advanced on us, brandishing knives and steel rods, the members obviously of that particular group, of that particular crowd, determined looking crowd, advanced on us, that means towards us. They were brandishing knives and steel rods. Just visualize what it would be if you in real situation face this thing. You were moving towards or across the road, and suddenly you face some people are facing and confronting and moving against you with steel rods and knives or maybe pistols. What would happen to you? What do you think? You would think. Just visualize the moment, the scene. So obviously they got nervous and they stopped. We stopped. Obviously, everyone must have the fear of life. Our voices grew louder as they came towards us. But since we were in a collective group, our slogans, our voices grew louder. This was the only way that we could protest, we could resist. So the more they approached towards us, the more loud our voice grew. A kind of rapture descended on us. A kind of rapture means a kind of spasmic excitement, feat, extreme nervousness descended on us, fell on us. Exhilaration in anticipation of a climax. We are extremely exhilarated, that is, excited. In anticipation, in expecting of a climax. We were expecting a climax, that something climactic would happen now. It may be good or bad. We braced for the attack. We braced means we prepared ourselves for the assault that would be immediately attacked, so we braced ourselves. We took preventive measures. Leaning forward as though into a wind. Leaning forward means we leaned forward. We leaned forward as though into a wind. We don't know where we were moving. We were moving into wind. But we certainly know that something disastrous would happen now. So we lean forward means we tended forward, we fell forward as though into wind, as if into a wind. But we know how ironic the situation is. It's not into wind. They are moving. They are moving into a violent crowd, and at any moment they would be assaulted with those rods, knives. So just imagine how violent would be the memory. how violent would be that present moment of horror when you were facing with such rioting crowds, rioting mob, and you were almost certain that you would be killed, you would be burned or hacked to death. Okay? So this is for right now. So just go through the text again, read it, introspect, and write down the questions and answer by yourself. Have a good day. Okay, thanks.